The big news story of the last few years is clearly the rise of the far-emerging markets, and in particular the rise of China. A report from IMS Health at the end of last year, who in fact coined that rather unlovely term, far-emerging markets, forecast that China would become the third largest pharmaceutical market in the world this year, with sales in constant US dollar terms of approximately 50 billion. And that compares to about 300 billion for the United States and about 850 billion for the total global market. So China's really become a very substantial player in the global market, with countries such as India, Korea, and Taiwan really following in fairly brisk order. Even the most skeptical commentators expect a growth rate of some 20 to 25% for the foreseeable future in many of these key Asian markets. And so it's no surprise to see that in fact our clinical trial activities have really been following that enormous growth in that region. To date, countries like China and India have participated in only something like 3 to 4% of the world's industry-sponsored phase 1 to 3B clinical trials. But some data published a couple of years ago in Nature showed that proportion growing at a really meteoric rate. We've been seeing a compound annual growth rate in so-called trial density in China of 47%, which is the highest in the world, and is matched with a commensurate decline in some of the more established territories like Europe and the United States and Canada. I think perhaps maybe just to finish on the point more subtly, but maybe more importantly, those of us that have been working in the Asian region for some time have seen almost a mindset shift in the way the industry has come to think about the region. I think it's possible to say that historically Asia was seen as something somewhat secondary and peripheral to the global clinical development enterprise. I think that kind of position, to the extent that it ever was tenable, is really not likely to remain so. And I think companies really the world over are now racing to put Asia at a central position in their global clinical development planning and operations. And so, Steve, at the risk of giving maybe a slightly tangential answer to a very direct question, I think you could say that the real opportunities and challenges for the industry in respect of these emerging regions are, in a way, organizational challenges. It's how to configure ourselves as a true global industry.
There's been a lot of press about our going collectively as an industry to emerging regions. Vanity Fair did a fairly extensive article on this a few months ago. There are often movies about this, and I'm going to invoke the famous words. We get accused of using patients in these regions as guinea pigs. I want to hit that issue right on the head, and I want to put a completely different paradigm out for us to consider. The business we are in is providing treatment to patients. So why wouldn't we go to the parts of the world where there is the greatest unmet need? And why would we be so arrogant as to assume that the therapies that work in the West work the same in those parts of the world? The practice of medicine is different. The use of herbal and other traditional medicines at the same time is different and confounding. And so I think we have an imperative as an industry, if we want to work in these regions, to do two things. One, not to go to countries where we don't intend to market the medicine, and I think we've heard that several times already today. That's an ethical concern. And second, to truly understand how our therapies work in those patient populations. So we're not there to exploit or, as has been suggested, because it's less expensive. We're there because that's where patients need therapy that we can provide. And in fact, there are many indications where we can probably develop the drug faster in the West, because we've characterized the systems and the infrastructure is well defined. In many of the countries we're talking about, the infrastructure is not well defined. The understanding of GCP is not well defined. The amount of checking and reviewing and continual education we need to conduct effective trials is far more in these regions. So why are we there? We're there because there's an opportunity, of course, we're capitalists, but we're also there because we need to understand how those therapies work in those patients. And I don't think it's a xenophobic issue associated, with trying to force us to do work. It's because there are practical considerations that are medical that need to be addressed. So I just want to try for us as a group and as an industry to help shift the paradigm that the press has, that we go there because it's faster and cheaper. It's really not faster and cheaper when you consider all the costs associated with doing it well. It's because we're trying to serve an unmet need the best possible way.